I'm going to presume that you can see it because I do have another screen here, and I think that should be it. Welcome to class. Okay, good. I think there was just an issue with the full screen share, so not to worry, we'll just keep on moving. Edit that out in the replay. So there is me, another photo of me. You're sick looking at me now at this point. So I really want to encourage you to get the most from this web class, to really treat it like a real class. So I know we're here in the chat wing, we have the chat box going on too, but other than that, switch off all your distractions. You're only going to be with me for less than an hour now at this point. So I really want you to get the most out of this class. And the best thing, like all my photography class students know, is to have that camera out beside you and in your hand, because we're going to learn some real in-life things, in real life tips tonight that will help you with your photography. So I want you to be having a look on your camera and seeing where those are. Now, Kerry is telling me that the slides are disappearing. Kerry, try and refresh your screen, because they should be fine right now. They should be moving along. On my second screen, they seem to be moving along. So maybe try and refresh your screen and see if you can see them. Okay, so photography is more popular now than ever before. People are taking more and more and more photographs. Every time you turn around, you've got somebody taking a photo of themselves, usually with their phone or their camera or whatever. But we're seeing more photos all the time. We're seeing photos everywhere, in every print media and social media, online, you name it. Everybody has to have a photo attached to it. So you would think then, if we are taking more photos, then our photos would actually be getting better. But we find that they're really not. Why is this? Because they talk about having 10,000 hours worth of practice in any hobby or any sport or any thing that you want to get good at to really improve yourself. So you would think we would have probably amassed at least 10,000 hours worth of photography at this point. We think that, well, we've got technology that now has got better. Has the technology got better? You know, everybody has a fancy camera now. Does that not make everybody a really fancy photographer, right? The problem is that the camera is not just the be all and end all of everything. Photography is more than just having a good camera. And if you've already invested in a good digital SLR or a mirrorless, or even just a really good compact camera, you know that it takes more than just the camera to do the work. I recently read a thing, I think it was on Facebook, or no doubt it was somewhere like that. This photographer had gone into a person's house for dinner, and the wife had said, or the wife of the person's house he was in said, oh, you know, you have a really nice camera, or you take really good photos. Your camera takes really good photos. You must have a really good camera. And so after eating the dinner, the photographer said to the person's house that he was in, oh, that was a really nice meal you made there. You must have a really good oven, right? So it's the same thing with the camera. The oven doesn't make the dinner the same way as the camera doesn't necessarily make those brilliant photos. We have to know a little bit more about photography than just having a good picture. Now, there are several parts of a good photo, and I have kind of boiled those down to three particular things. First of all, there's the technical know-how. You've got to know a little bit about the technical stuff to be able to take a good shot. Then there's the artistic know-how. You certainly have to be able to view photography as an art form, and to be able to take your pictures in an artistic way to get better and to get those types of photos that we're all after. And the third thing is the digital editing know-how. Now, people sometimes think that the editing piece is just unique to digital, that it's only something that we've had to worry about since digital has come along, but that is not the case, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But those are the three parts of the perfect photo: technical, artistic, and then that little bit of edit. And most of the time, what I find when I have students come to me is that they're missing one of those parts. So they're really good with the artistic, but they're missing the technical, or they're really good with the editing, but that still doesn't make up for the artistic and definitely not the technical side of things. So we're going to look a little bit about those three parts tonight, and maybe help you a little bit along your way as to where you might be lacking with your photography. So we're going to start off by thinking and looking at the technical know-how that comes to play with our camera. So our digital cameras are very clever and they can do an awful lot. You know, you spend a lot of money on a digital camera. That's the reason why you've got this big fancy camera, right? Because, you know, you pay for its intelligence. You know, can't quite just make the tea or the coffee just quite yet. Excuse me, but they can do an awful lot. The thing is that most people don't actually know what they can do. I mean, how many of you have actually sat down to read the camera manual? Don't do it now if that's, you know, that is certainly not required reading for this class. Will surely put you to sleep. Most definitely written by somebody who is not a photographer. They really won't tell you an awful lot about why things, you know, are in a certain way. But it really, you know, it still would help a little bit more than like just taking the camera out of the box, turning it to the green man and taking a picture. And most people don't even move out of that auto mode without that confidence and conviction they need to take good photos, right? So what are we going to do about all of this? Well, let's move on. The sad thing is that people are missing out on really good photos if you don't put in that little bit of upfront time to learn a few of the basics. And it's not an awful lot, but people are intimidated by the technology. They're intimidated by the language of these camera manuals. And what happens? Most people just go back to using their phone cameras as well instead. And you know, the truth is I'm guilty of this too. You know, my camera I use a 7D. It's a big camera. It takes a lot to carry it around. I have to be watching it and minding it. And sometimes it's easier just to take a good shot with my phone. But the thing is when you go back and look at those photos, yeah, they're good for a snapshot. But if you really truly want to, you know, be artistic and creative with your photos, you really have to use your camera and you have to know how to use your good camera. The phones are great, but you can't really be very artistic with them. Now, I know there are some great iPhone photos out there, but there's other parts that go to play with that as well. So some of the basic things that you can control with your digital SLR or your mirrorless camera, or indeed if you've got an advanced compact camera, are basic things like controlling the focus point, okay? Now, when you are in automatic, or if you leave your camera just in the green auto, or even in the just without ever changing it away, and without ever changing this setting, your camera will automatically pick out what it thinks you want to focus on. So that could be the biggest thing in the frame, or generally the closest thing to you in the frame, right? So when you peep through your viewfinder of your camera, so if you have your camera there, pick it up, turn it on, make sure it's turned on and the lens cap's off and you're pointing it at something. When you half press your finger on the shutter button, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of little lights inside your camera that will light up. Now, depending on the type of camera you have, if you've Canon or Nikon, Sony, Panasonic, they're all going to be different. You're going to have green lights, red lights, black squares, green squares, all sorts of things. But you'll see as you half press your finger on the shutter button, as your camera tries to find focus, those little dots or boxes will brighten up over what the camera thinks you want to focus on. Okay, now can everybody do that and see that, just so that I am with you all and that everybody is with me, because I want to make sure we are doing some action points here. I'm going to move on down. So here's a slide just giving you an idea of what the focus points look like in the 40D or the 50D. So depending on the camera, you might have 3 of these, you might have 9, you might have 64, depending on the camera model you have. And you can select which one of these that you want your camera to be your main focal point, your main focus point. Because every photograph has to have a focal point. And that is missing from so many students' photography that I see. They see a beautiful scene, they want to get it all in the picture, and they just don't really think about, well, no, hang on a minute. What is the most important part of this picture? Where is it that I want the viewer's eye to go when they look at that? And one of the easiest ways to direct your viewer's eye is to have an extremely sharp part of your photo. And if you let the camera choose where that is, not only will it pick the closest thing or the biggest thing to you in the frame, which may not be what you're trying to take a picture of, it will also flatten out the image between 2 or 3 points that are like in the distance, close to you and in the distance, so that everything becomes in focus. And this happens when you are shooting in program mode. So you get a very flat, dull image, okay? The same as a snapshot, because the camera doesn't want you to take anything that's way too blurry or in or out of focus, so it's going to, you know, flatten out that depth of field. But you can take control of that focus point and you can decide what area of your image is going to be in focus, and then conversely, what parts of your photo are going to be out of focus. Okay? Is everybody with me? I'm just going to have a quick look in the chat box. Everybody's gone very quiet in here. Either I've lost you all or you're all with me. Can I get a hello from anybody that's still there? It's great to see some familiar faces in here. I see Diane, and I don't know how to say your name, but it begins with an O, and I know you're in the Take 52 group. So welcome here again tonight. Okay, good. I get a smiley face from Kelly. That'll do. All right. So I want you now, like I said, switch your camera to program auto mode. Now, if you haven't already seen my article in program auto mode earlier from this week on the blog, P or program auto mode is a very powerful setting on your camera, and it really will help you to really learn what's going on with your camera. So go ahead and switch it to there, and then locate the focus point selection button. If you're on Canon, it's a button on the back of your camera at the top right hand side, and it's got like the same as the little kind of crosshair of those little lights in the back of the camera. That's what you'll see as the picture on their icon on that shortcut button. If you've got Nikon, you have to look for the autofocus area mode, I think it is, in the camera menu or in the shortcut button menu on the back. So if you go to that, you should be able to find it. And now you can change your focus point by using the up, down, left, or right buttons on the back of your camera. Okay, so just to give you an idea, the shortcut button here on the Canon is up here on the right hand side. So when you press that in, you'll now see in the back LCD of your camera that the little icons, the little dots light up the same way as they did in the screen. And you can use those and choose any one of those focal points. Okay, Nikon users, again, it's autofocus area mode in your quick menu. If you've got Sony or Panasonic, you'll just have to have a wee poke around and see in the camera menu where you find that. They're not just as easy to find as a couple of these, but it's autofocus area mode that you're looking for. And you want to select a single focus point. Okay, now there's 2 different ways of doing this, but we're only going to have time to look at one particular way right now, and that's called toggling your focus points. So the idea is that you frame your picture first, so you see what you want to take through the viewfinder, and then you decide whereabouts you want your focal point to be. So if I'm holding my camera up in front of my face and taking a photograph of, say, my daughter, and she's out playing, I want the focus to be on her, right? Now, she might not be in the center of my frame, and the camera may or may not in automatic pick up on that focus on her. It could pick up on something else if there happens to be something else going on in the frame. But now what I can do is I press my autofocus selection point button, and using my buttons on the back, the up, down, left, and right arrow keys, I can select where my focus point is over her, okay? So I will move it over, say, to the right-hand side of the frame, and that is now the part of my image that the camera will pull sharply into focus. Does everybody follow what I'm saying? So you can move those focus points around. So the idea is that if you've got Canon, you have to press that button in, that focus point selection button, and move the buttons as you're looking through your viewfinder and you see where you want to focus on, right? If you've got Nikon and you just change it in the autofocus area mode to single focus point selection, then as you move that toggle point, you don't have to have that selected. As you move the keypad, you will actually be able to move that point of focus. Does that make sense? My Canon users, my Nikon users out there, I know several of you use those, or two of the very popular ones. This is something that is really key because, as I said, getting that focus point will really and dramatically change your picture. And if you're in the Take 52 group with me, you know how important it is to have a single point of focus for every photograph, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that that has to be the very place where your eye ends up, but it ultimately is, it's usually the first place your eye goes, right? Now, so have a look at that, take some time to play around with that. Really, what you want to do is be able to comfortably change those points without moving your eye away from the viewfinder. So, and it will help if you're outside. Obviously tonight, I'm sure most of us are not outside as we are listening to this. Maybe somebody sitting on a beach somewhere, that would be quite nice. But most of the time, you want something that has a good bit of distance behind your subject so that you can really see your camera moving in and out of focus as you move those, as you toggle and move those focus points. Yeah, if Carrie asks if she already has hers on single point or spot focus, that's fine. That's perfect, Carrie. As long as you're moving that focus point to where you want. Now, there is another method called focus lock and recompose, and that's another way of doing it. Right now, we're just looking at moving the focus points. So as long as you know where your camera is focusing on and you're taking control over that, that is the main part. That's the main thing that I'm trying to get across here. So this is only a tiny fraction of the type of things that we can talk about and learn. And most of those, if you look in your program auto mode, they're all going to be opened up to you now. That if you're in auto or you're just shooting in the green auto or any of those the automatic settings like the portrait mode, the landscape mode, those do not allow you to change these types of settings. So, you know, my suggestion is to take a little time to learn some of those, and those things are going to dramatically increase your knowledge and improve your photos, right? Now, the second part of the equation, if there can be a three-parted equation, I believe there can. The second part of that is the artistic know-how. Now, this is another part that people struggle with a lot in their photography. We all know what a beautiful photograph is when we see it, because these are the ones that everybody is looking at online going, oh my gosh, these photos are so beautiful. Why can't I get my photos to look like that? Why aren't my photos just like perfect like this? And so, yes, there's a certain amount of technical knowledge that you need to know. But that enough does not make you a good photographer. And believe me, I know, because you can read books and take courses and do a whole bunch of knowledge stuff around photography, and that is never going to make you a good photographer. You do have to practice this part of it, which is the artistic side. And there's definitely a part of the artistic know-how that comes naturally to a lot of people. A lot of people just, you know how to put together a photo, but there's more things than just composition. You know, you've got to know more stuff than just controlling your camera. You have to know things like light and how to deal with light. You've got to really, obviously, we're talking about composition. There has to be a good connection. If you're doing portrait photography, you have to be able to connect with your subject, and that's really what will make a really good portrait. And there's this, what we call, and I'm doing my bunny rabbit ears here, the artistic eye. And what I find is that many people have that artistic eye naturally. And maybe they see themselves artistic, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes, you know, they come to me with as a photographer and or as somebody that wants to really learn photography, and they just know that they, you know, they can take good pictures. And but most people who are drawn to photography have a certain amount of natural ability with this, you know, artisticness. They kind of know why things look good, or they kind of know what things look good, but they don't necessarily know why they look that way. And you know, sometimes and I do consider this a gift, and sometimes people don't even know that this is a gift. And I have a few students in here right now tonight that I could call out and say they never were aware of their gift, and I can tell that they have they're great photographers, and sometimes people will say to you, you know, oh, you've taken a great photo, or you know, that's a great photo you've taken, or you just have a natural ability for taking those photos. But then if you ask you to try and do it again, you've no idea how you got there. So it's really hard for you to reproduce that scene that you've gotten. And that is because we do not dig deep enough into why we like a scene to look the way it looks. Okay, I get kind of excited about when I'm talking about this, because I think that this can be a breakthrough point for a lot of people. We have to train ourselves to look and see and ask ourselves why something really stands out to us. What is it that we are trying to communicate by taking a photograph? And it's just not enough to say, oh, this looks pretty, you know, I'm going to take this photo. There has to be deeper meaning to it than that. And it doesn't have to be a deep meaning, like big story or anything, but you should know, like, is it the way that the mountains, you know, work against the skyline, or is it the contrast of the colors of the leaves, and is it to do, you know, is it the textures of the shapes? What is it? And that is going to give you key as to what you want to put in the center of your frame, or off center, or whereabouts you want to place something in your frame, and what is going to be the main story of your photograph. Does that make sense? So once you've got that why, right, and once you understand that why, then there are also things that you can learn about being a better photographer in terms of composition. Now, composition is definitely some skills that can be worked on. And in case you don't know, composition is that art of putting together all of those elements of that photograph that is pleasing to somebody who's looking at it, right? So anytime anybody has taken a good photograph that you look at and go, wow, you know, you are seeing the end result of maybe 20, 40, 50, 100 photos that that person has taken of that scene already. Now, sometimes they might hit lucky, and sometimes I get lucky, right? And I get the one shot. But mostly you have to take, like an artist makes several sketches, a photographer will take several photos before they get to the right one. And they're going to use the tools that they know in their tool belt of how to compose a photograph the right way to make that compelling image. And your objective as a photographer is to create a compelling image that's going to hold your viewer's attention enough and that they can lead their eye through the image. You also have to create feelings and emotions with your viewer and ultimately tell a story. And that's a lot, right? And that all comes in composition, and you cannot really learn this by just reading about it. So this is why, you know, anybody who's in my Take 52 group will know the act of going out and taking photos and figuring out, okay, this tree looks good over here and this looks better if I put this over there. there is where you are going to really, really improve. Now, I did say this is an active class, so I do want you to, let's look together at one of the very basic foundations of composition. And if I didn't teach you anything else tonight, this is a good one to know. But also, I want you to slow yourself down and stop and think before you shoot. Think about how best to compose your shot and take several different photos of that one scene, right? Now, before we go on, we're going to learn this one, which is a compositional basic tool that you may already know, and if you've studied with me in the past, you definitely know, but this is called the rule of thirds, okay? Now, the rule of thirds is a basic compositional rule again with my bunny ears, right? The rule means that you kind of have to know it before you can break it, okay? But the rule of thirds helps you to get a photograph that is more attractive and more pleasing to the eye in general than one that hasn't been thought through with the rule of thirds. That's not to say it's the only way to compose an image. We are looking again, I'm going back to Take 52 this week, we're looking at minimal photos, and a lot of those are not done on the rule of thirds, and they look perfect. And of course, there's no such thing as right and wrong, because this is photography and we're all artists and we can get away with saying whatever we want. But the rule of thirds will really help you if you are a beginner and if you're struggling to figure out, okay, do I put this up here or do I put this down there? It really does help. And it works for all types of photography. So whether you shoot landscapes or people or abstracts or any kind of nature photography, architectural stuff, it all works along these lines of the rule of thirds, okay? So what is it? Well, basically what you do is you imagine a tic-tac-toe grid line in your viewfinder. And in fact, some digital cameras or SLRs can already do that already, okay? You can actually figure out a way of putting on this grid line in your viewfinder. And this is where our subjects of interest should go. Whoops, I'm trying to find my mouse here. So the idea of the rule of thirds is rather than placing our subjects dead center here, or actually in any of these boxes, what you want to do is place your main subjects of interest, i.e., as we've talked about earlier, your focal points, along where these crosshairs are, where these lines of thirds intersect, okay? So we have something interesting that could go on here, up at the top right, bottom right, bottom left, okay? Not in here. So if this was a landscape, we can show you here, and these are not perfect by any means, but they're just a guide, right? We have the point of interest, an interesting tree formation right along here, rather than right in the center of the frame. Or it's quite a bit over in the third rather than kind of just hanging out of the frame either, right? It looks a little bit more balanced. Going back to the lines, we also can have our vertical lines, anything that is a vertical line, like a tree, like a lamppost, like, something that is standing up straight, a person standing along one of these lines of third, and then a horizon or a skyline, or maybe where sand meets sea, falling along one of these third lines as well, which means that you'll have a photograph with either a lot of sky, or a lot of ground, or a little bit of ground and or a little bit of sky and a lot of ground, right? Because we're not putting it right in the middle. And if you have any sunset photos or anything in your repertoire, in your portfolio, go back and look at the ones where the lines are right in the center. The horizon is right in the center, and see how maybe you could crop it and reformat it to make it a little bit more impactful just by changing your crop. Okay, so here the horizon line is going nicely along that bottom third, and we have more sky going on than we have obviously of the marsh. Now my son's in the middle, and that's okay. You know, I could have done it, and in fact I do have a lot where the sun was over, but you know, this tree and the sun is there in the wintertime and the tree is there, so there's not an awful lot I could do about that, you know, but I could change it around. But it's still better than if it was right in the center and I had omitted the tree altogether, right? This one as well, now this is not one of the sharpest photos, but for some reason it was taken at a very high ISO, and I don't know, but I really like it, of Sophie. And again, the rule of thirds has been applied because, well, yes, she's centered, but she's in the top frame, the top third. And where I want her eyes to be, which is the main focus, is along that top line of third, right? We also have her elbow coming down here, another third, a line of along the third, right? So you'll see how you can apply it in everyday photos. And what is really interesting to do is to go back, like I say, in your catalog, over in your library of existing images that you have, and see how you can recrop your photos with that line of thirds and that grid line. Now you'll see most editing software pieces have a thirds crop line that you can actually select. For sure Photoshop does, Lightroom does, I believe Picasa does, and PicMonkey, the ones that we are talking about online. So just play with that, and you know, the beautiful thing about digital photography, when we're not printing the stuff out like this one, like it doesn't matter. We can make this nice and long and skinny. That photo is and so that it'll fit around along our rule of thirds line, right? We don't have to stick to that 6x4 dimensions that we did have to years ago. Now, a good example, just showing you how you can do that, is here is this. I believe it's some sort of a castle. We have them around every corner in Ireland, right? And you see, it's a good picture. It's okay, but the subject is right in the center. So this is the same picture, and it's just cropped off to the side. So let me just go back here again. So that's the full frame right here, okay? So my horizon is pretty much in the center, and my subject is in the center. It's okay, right? Not great. But see how much more interesting it is when I move it over to that third side, and part of it is missing from the screen here for some reason. I'm not sure why. It's probably my screen. But anyway, it is moved over there. Maybe I just made it too big. See, this is what happens when I can get in now and move the PowerPoint all around. It shouldn't be doing that. Okay, so what I did was I recropped it. This is more over to the third. The horizon I moved down, so we've got more stuff going on up here. And we just played around with it, right? And so a simple crop can make it from like, oh, that's okay, to, oh yeah, that's pretty, right? So by utilizing that rule of thirds, it's really quite powerful. And once you get into it, and once you start to improve as your photography gets on, you really start to see that naturally. And that is one of the things that, if you have that natural ability, you know, you might already find yourself that you're doing that, okay? So I want you to pay attention to that rule of thirds, and if you have a grid, the ability to turn on that grid in your camera, you might find that that is a useful thing to do. Now, we're talking about ways to make your photos better, okay? And so we've talked about the technical know-how that is a must, and also a little bit of artistic know-how. And like I say, I'm going to give myself one more plug for the Take 52. If you're not in there, at least join and hang out and see the beautiful photos that people are presenting there on a weekly basis. It's amazing, and I'm so proud of all of my people that take part, because it is a really good way of getting out and improving your skills. Now, the final thing that I hinted at earlier, that is to do with making your photos better, and when we compare with our photos that are online and ours, why ours look so poorly, is the editing, okay? And editing is a huge part of it. And, you know, I get people all the time like, well, you know, I just like to take the photos straight out of the camera. I want them to look good straight out of the camera. But they never were like that, good straight out of the camera. I have to say to people, stop reminiscing. Editing has always been important, right? This is one of my hobby horses, or my high horse, right? I used to be a photo printer. I printed. I was the person you would give your roll of film to when you developed, when you left it in to get developed, and I was the person that made your photos look really good. So when you got them back, they were full of color and contrast, and they were sharp, and the greens were green and the blues were blue. Now what happens is, you take the pictures on your camera and you put them on your computer and you upload them to Facebook, and they're flat and they're dull and they're, you know, they're lacking, because the camera doesn't do that edit for you, or at least if it does, it only does a tiny bit, right? And most people forget about that editing process. Now, I'm not talking about editing as in, you know, going bananas and editing, you know, making gray skies into blue skies, and, you know, changing the color of people's eyes and changing all sorts of things and getting rid of telegraph poles. That's not what I mean by editing. What I'm talking about is the little tiny tweaks that you can do to your photos to make them really pop, okay? And it is usually the difference between a tiny little thing and, you know, just a move of a slider left or right, just to kind of punch up color or whatever. You do not need Photoshop. You do not need to be, you know, an expert in anything. Now, I have to say, if you do and are, you know, want to go down the line of Photoshop, that's fine. There's a huge learning curve with Photoshop, you know, as anybody that has taken any, you know, programs in that, or classes in Photoshop, it's not something you can just, you know, learn quickly. But you can do an awful lot of these editing things with some really nice editing software that's free. I personally love to use Picasa when I'm teaching students that have never edited before. Picasa is a free program from Google. It will allow you not only to edit but to organize your images. So if it works on PC, it works on Mac, Picasa is great. But there's also some really fun ones out there like picmonkey.com. And if you really do like to edit and you really are secretly saying, okay, I hear what Ingrid's saying, I just need to tweak things a little bit, but maybe you're interested in doing, you know, getting rid of a few blemishes, or, you know, losing a few pounds on your portraiture. PicMonkey is a really fun online editing program. It works different to Picasa. Picasa you download and use on your computer. PicMonkey you upload your photos, so you edit them one at a time. But it you know, you can do a lot with PicMonkey, and it's quite fun. But even just the basic edits are, you know, easy to do and very fast to do. If somebody's really into, you know, at the advanced stages of wanting to use some editing software, I do highly recommend Lightroom, because I think it's the easiest one to get a handle on if you've never used editing before, and it also organizes your images really well. It's a really, really powerful program. So I want you to encourage you that, you know, small tweaks can yield big results. And if a photograph is worth sharing, and if it's worth sharing on Facebook, or, you know, worth sharing with or printing out, for sure, it's worth doing a little tiny edit too. So I just wanted to give you an example of some of the things that you can do with very minor editing adjustments. You know, I love to do abstract stuff, and not even abstract stuff, but just, you know, random objects. As much as I love to take photos of my children, if you give me an hour to go off and take photos by myself, I'll, you know, thoroughly enjoy that too, right? So here's a pretty good photograph of the shell, you know, okay, so a nice focus here. It's lower thirds. I'm following all my own rules here, right? But it was lacking. So what I did in this one was just turned it to black and white and upped the contrast. Black and white, y'all, is awesome for really bringing up texture and detail where you might not have seen it before. Like if we were to zoom in on this, we can see every little grain of sand here. So the black and white allows you to really go mad with your contrast. I've also recropped it a little bit to bring it a little bit more into this lower quadrant here, just to kind of give it a bit more of a dramatic, you know, get rid of some of this stuff that didn't really matter, make it a little bit more dramatic, make the shell more of my focal point. And then I've added what's called a vignette. Now, a vignette will darken your corners, and it's, again, it's a slider. It's such an easy thing to do in something like PicMonkey, but it also helps to draw your eye in to the center of the image, or to the focal point in the image. You see that little slight darkening around the edges? That's just called a vignette. And if you're wondering how to get that, like I say, very, very simple, and it really yields a very professional result. Another one here, you can see I'm a big fan of black and white. I do love black and white. And again, this is an ordinary photograph of Molly, and this was at her school play, and you can tell she was an angel, and she is one, of course. But you know, it's hard in those sort of situations to be very creative, right? There's like 24, well, there were 3-year-olds running around like acting out the nativity. So I don't have a lot of time to stop and think about being creative and where I want my focus to be and whatever. I want to be able to grab a shot when I can. So editing then becomes my best friend, right? Because I have our friends in the background here, but I could bring it into the editing program. I could crop it. Again, remember, you're not confined by 6x4 or any of these sizes, because this is one I probably won't print out. Maybe I will print this one for her book, but most of the time I won't print them. They're just going to be for my mom to have a look at, right? So I can crop, that's the first thing, and then changing it to black and white just gets rid of all of the distracting stuff in the background. I can make it really high key, which just means, you know, really up in your contrast, making our whites whiter. Still shows off the her lovely eyes, you know, even though they're blue, they really still have that sparkle in them. And again, you can see where I have vignetted it around the sides, so around those corners, so it's really even darkened in the sides a little bit more. Edit. Took me about probably 2 minutes to do that. Okay. And again, the same. Now, those two photos, you know, they're kind of dramatic because they've gone to black and white. Here is an ordinary photograph of Rosa May, my niece, and this is truly a snapshot. You know, in fact, no, it was taken with the DSLR. It probably could be sharper, but you can see with Rosa May, you know, even straight out of the camera, with no fancy edits done to vignetting or cropping or anything like that, you can see how it looks better. Like this is a truer skin tone here, and her hair is a truer color than this, you know, one here on the left, right? So a little edit, we warmed it up a little bit. We just, you know, just played with the white balance until we got her color a little bit more like what it was. Probably took 20 seconds, but worthwhile doing. And if you're doing that in Lightroom, you can do it to all of your images, all back to back to back. Now, editing is super, super important. And like I say, you can learn an awful lot about it, but a lot of it is trial and error. You can certainly play with it. For these basic edits, I recommend the easiest way to do it is just to get in and play. But you can be guaranteed that any photo that you're comparing your work to online has been edited at some point. It isn't, you're not getting straight out of the camera. And a word to people that are shooting in RAW, because a lot of times people move from JPEG to RAW. Now this might be beyond a lot of students that are here. If you're shooting in RAW, there is no editing whatsoever being done to that picture in the camera. With a JPEG, you may, depending on what picture style you have selected, you may have chosen to make it a little bit more contrasty, or you probably haven't even chosen it. The camera's already preset that for you, right? A little bit more contrasting, what have you. But if you're shot in RAW, you have none of those edits being made in camera. So an image straight out of the camera in the RAW format will look extremely dull and flat, and it absolutely needs to be edited. And that doesn't mean, like I say, going crazy, but just those little tweaks. And if you use a program like Lightroom and you shoot like, you know, 30 shots, 40 shots in the same setup, the same lighting or whatever, you can sync your photos, your edits all to be the same, right? So you can do an edit to one and it'll copy it through on like the rest of those 30. So we've talked about 3 different things that are really important. We've talked about the artistic side of things, the technical side of things, and the editing side of things. And those 3 things together really do go to make up your photo, to make up your really good photos. And by focusing in on each one of those parts, that's how you are going to improve your photography. But they do take time. It takes time to get better. And I'm just going to ask you the question now, like, when is it that you're going to get better? When are you going to take that time to get better? Because if you keep doing the same things with your camera and you keep playing and changing and not really doing anything with any real direction, you're really not going to get any better, and your photos are just going to be the same. And you're going to go back to where Our Lady was here at the beginning and using your phone. So what I wanted to just talk to you for 5 minutes about is my new course that it's actually a revised course, and by introducing it tonight is called Demystify Your DSLR. And I know many of you who are on the call tonight have already taken this class, and that is awesome. And if you are past the beginner stages, then this class probably isn't for you, okay? And I'm delighted that you've come, and that, you know, I hope this was a little bit of a refresher for you. But if you do find yourself struggling with things like focus points and white balance and ISO and metering and all of those things, or maybe you have no clue all of those things that I've just said right there, okay? I want to encourage you to think about joining me for the Demystify Your DSLR course, which is going to be taking place live over the next 4 to 6 weeks, but it is a recorded course. So if you don't have the time, you can pop on there and you can knock through the material at your own pace. You can go through it as you want to, as quickly, as fast as you want to. So what we're really going to look at, it's a 4-module class. It's delivered by video. So there are videos in the way that this is a video right now, okay? So I'm sharing my screen, talking through points. But the videos, each module there's about 4 to 5 videos within each module, and I've broken them down in really bite-sized chunks, because what I've found after doing these classes for a long time is that, you know, it's really hard to sit down and watch a video all the way through from beginning to end. And that's why I appreciate y'all being here tonight, because you've sat down and watched me from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock. But each of those little modules are broken down into bite-sized pieces, so you can watch one as it relates to you and then come back and watch the next one if you have time, or review and rewind and rewatch. The second module, we talk about light. And like I said, light as well as composition is one of those very important things. Now, we didn't talk too much about lighting today, but light has a huge impact on your photographs. And as a beginner, it's impossible to even, you know, whereabouts to go to take a good photo, right? And I remember what that is like to be there. So we talk at the very basic level about lighting in module 2. In module 3, we're going to talk about some composition basics, and we're going to talk about that creative process. I really think that it's important, even as much as I want you to get a handle on your camera, you do have to start to think in a compositional frame of mind, because that's only the way you're going to get better. And it would be so boring just to learn about this button does this and this button does that. You have to have the compositional part, so you can put those 2 things together, right? And you can go out and say, okay, taking a good photo of a portrait, of a person. So what settings do I need to use for that? Okay, yeah, Ingrid taught us that in module 1, and put that together with the composition that you're learning in module 2. And then module 4 is that final piece of the puzzle, which is a basic introduction to editing. Now, like I say, it's certainly not a Photoshop course. It's certainly not even a Lightroom course, but it is a basic introduction to edit and organization for your images, so that you can be confident that the end result that you put out there with your images is your best work and is the best that you can come up with, knowing everything that you know as a beginner. So like I said, it's a 4-module course. It's available to access from right now. If you wanted to get going on it, you could have the whole lot done by the weekend if you wanted. But the best thing about this course is that we are going to have live office hours every week. So we're going to do, at least for 6 weeks over the real duration of the course, or 4 to 6 weeks, because I want to give people a little time to be able to catch up if they need to. We're going to do live office hours. So that's where I'm going to come on and do a little presentation just like this I think we have it slotted in for a Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Probably only a half an hour. We're going to answer any questions that you have. We're going to review anything that you want, or go deeper into any area that you want to. And those will be recorded. So if you can't make the live version, you'll get to see the replay of that. And we'll also have that private Facebook group, which we haven't had in, we sort of had it, but it wasn't as popular. People weren't in there as much, but I'm hoping that it'll get a little bit more active, and it's a good place for you to share your homework, share the assignments, and ask questions from your fellow people in the class. So of course, the benefit of doing a class like this is that you don't have to leave your home. So if you're up to your eyeballs in snow and sleet outside, you can have this class knocked out before it all thaws. You're going to have access to it all for a whole year, and if you still don't get it after a year, I'll give you access for another year. There's really no cutoff point with all of this. Lots of action points, lots of assignments. The assignments, I feel, are quite meaty, so that it takes you time to put into practice the stuff that you're learning, and you will learn it. And I want to reiterate that I will be with you every step of the way. I've been teaching photography for a long time. I'm 41 years old this year, and I've been in the photography industry since I was 14, but teaching specifically for nearly 15 years now. So I feel like I have actually eventually mastered the art of teaching, and teaching through the internet, and that involves a lot of one-to-one conversations with me like this. I want to do something special for people that want to come and join it straight away. So for anybody that buys within this, I'm going to give a time frame of really today or tomorrow, people who commit to getting the course, which is on sale at Demystify or DSLR.com. But if you decide to come on in and join us for the group, I would like to gift you 3 months of access to my membership site, which is called Take 52 Plus. And in Take 52 Plus, we put more emphasis on compositional stuff. Every month you'll receive a compositional video, a lesson, PDF, and again, we have a lot of critique and feedback on the work for that. So that usually costs $10 a month. So I want you to join that and have that as an extra bonus for joining, for people who want to buy the class tonight, and that's worth $30 on its own. So the class itself, I actually didn't even put it on a slide. It's $149, and like I say, you will have access to it for the duration of the live program, but also for the duration of as long as it needs to get you going. But I really don't think it should take you any more than 6-8 weeks to go through the material. And certainly if you're doing the material 1 module a week, which is the way that it was intended, you will be well out of there in 4 or 5 weeks. So I really want you to start taking better photos, and I want you to be able to put those 3 things together: the technical know-how, the compositional thing, and to get to know a little bit about the editing. And I think with Demystify your DSLR, and that little bit of backup from me with those in-person classes, those in-person office hours, I think that should be able to do it for you. So thank you very much for joining me tonight. If anybody has any questions, I'm still here and you can ask me the question in the chat box. I will deal with anything specifically that you will want. I know there was some people had some questions. Now is a good time to go ahead and ask. And it doesn't matter if it's related to this course, if it's related to what we were talking about or something else entirely. You got me for another 5 minutes and I will answer any questions that I can. Susan, I don't know if you're still here. You had a question about sharpness and photos. And I want to talk to you about that. I think what Susan's problem is that she's finding that she's not getting her photos are not as clear and as crisp as some photos that she's comparing them to. And I think that a lot of the times, and what might be the problem and the issue with you, Susan, is that your lenses might just not be up to the job, or you're maybe expecting too much from the lenses that you have. There are certainly a lot of different lenses for a lot of different types of photos, and the basic lenses sometimes just, you know, they're not just as good as some of the ones that professionals are using. So it could be that you might need to invest in a little bit of new lenses, and I'll certainly talk to you about that. If you want to shoot me an email or give me a call, in fact, we can go through it. You're welcome. Thank you for coming. How would I say your name? I don't know. Mr. Azad. Sabrina has a question and she's asking, is it better to take a photo in black and white or take it in color and then edit to black and white? So it's better, Sabrina, to take your photo in color and then edit in black and white. And the reason why is because if you take it in black and white, your camera has only one setup for black and white, okay? So it has one kind of color correction for black and white. Whereas if you do it in editing and post-production, there are many variations of black and white, from something that might be sepia toned to something that's very high key where you have very bright highlights and darker shadows, or something that's maybe a low contrast black and white. So there's a lot of variation within black and white. Also, of course, then if you take it in color, you still always have that color, right? The color image. So I always suggest to take it in color and then edit it into black and white. If you shoot in RAW, you can select black and white in the picture style and it will still take the photo in color, even though you see it in black and white in your viewfinder, in your LCD screen. And sometimes that can be a good idea if you want an indication of where, you know, how it's going to look as a black and white. So you can do that as a quick little preview. But I would absolutely suggest taking it in color and then change it in black and white. That's a good question. Anybody else? You're a quiet bunch. Carrie has a question. Carrie says, to see if changes in Lightroom, do you push the enter button? I'm having trouble exporting the finished product to my hard drive and upload to Camera Shy. This year I'm concentrating on editing composition. That's awesome. To see if the changes, do you push the enter button? Okay, so in Lightroom, once you do an edit, you don't have to, no, I'm trying to think without being in the program, you don't have to press enter or anything, right? Once you do the edit, it's there. And the way that Lightroom saves your changes, somebody explained it to me once, like it's like having a, you know, an index card clipped to something with the instructions. So it's like having a physical photo with the index card clipped to it, like with a paper clip, and what's written on the index card is Lightroom's instruction to itself saying, this should be edited into cropped, turned into black and white, and brightened 2 spots or whatever. And so the original photo in Lightroom is never changed. And so you are just, when you export it, you're exporting it with those original, or with that set of instructions, okay? Does that make sense? So whatever you export it to, or export it as, will be that saved image. So you're essentially making another copy of your image. Now, how I do it is, I end up, so say if I was taking a photo for my Take 52, I would take a photo, put it into Lightroom, I'll edit it the way I want it to look, and then I'll export it onto the desktop. And I export it usually at a 72 dpi, so that's your low resolution. And so it will export as the as the edited image, okay? And then once I've uploaded it to Facebook, I'll delete it because I'm done with it. The edited version is still there in Lightroom if I need it again. It's still there. And if I don't want it, I can just go ahead and undo all of those changes and go back to the original. So that's how I do it. I don't keep another hard copy of that edit. I just keep it on the desktop for as long as I need to upload it and then delete it. Does that make sense, Carrie? So let me read your question again. To save the changes, do you push enter button and having trouble exporting the finished? Yeah. So that's how I do it. I think, would that work for you? Does that make sense? Diane, and thank you for spending the evening with me. I'm glad that you got some tips and info. I am always cautious of, sometimes I don't have any clue if I'm talking to myself. Does that make sense? Will you try that and see if that works for you? Because that's how I do it. I don't see the sense in putting that back onto your hard drive or storing that edited image again. To me, that's just taking up space, because that's the idea. That's the beauty of having it in Lightroom, that it's there with that edit. Now you can, if you want to have several versions of it side by side, like you can make a copy. So what you want to do is go into Lightroom and look for, I think it's create a virtual copy. And then so you could have a color and a black and white version without going back and forth through undoing your edits. So, okay, well, let me know how you get on with that. All right, well, it's 9:10 here, and I am starting to get a sore throat. So I think it's about time we should finish up. So if anybody has any questions, you can email me anytime and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, Demystify Your DSLR is on sale right now. Tell all your friends. Join up if you think it will be useful to you. Thanks, Julia. It's great to see you. At least hang out with you a little bit online. And thank you so much for everybody for spending some time with me here this evening. And I will talk to you all soon.